Okay, here's the story. Let's go see you tomorrow. The new girl from across the street was looking at him again. Sometimes he saw her looking at him from her front porch, but this wasn't that. Their porches were 50 or 100 feet apart. This was inches. Inches. For the last 5 minutes, he'd been walking his bike alongside hers. Up the long hill, neither of them could ride without weaving back and forth. There were too many cars this time of day after school, so for the longest 5 minutes of his life, he'd been inches from her. Side by side, bike by bike. She was in the gravel, farthest from traffic, and he was walking more or less in the traffic lane beside her. Other than some cars, there was no one else around and only a few inches between them. He wanted to say something besides hi. The hi had gone really well, he thought, but that was like 3 or 4 minutes ago, and ever since then his mouth just felt sticky, like his words were walking barefooted on this bubbly tar road. He wanted to ask her about her homeroom, or school in general, or compliment her bike, or her blonde and gold hair, or no way he could say anything about her hair. But he wanted to. He really wanted to. He was just running out of time. He didn't even know what she liked to be called. He thought he'd heard her friends call her Allie and others call her Allison, but he wasn't sure. He also wasn't sure if her last name was Wood or Woods. He wanted to ask about that too, even though he was pretty sure it was Wood. He didn't know how to start the conversation he'd imagined. She was too new and he was too shy. 5 minutes. And their first walk was almost over. They'd be at the top of the hill soon, and he'd have to ride behind or in front of her the rest of the way to their street. If he didn't at least ask if she'd maybe like to ride around their street or even ride to school sometime or something, he'd have to start at the bottom of this hill all over again another day, hopefully with more than a hi for opener. Not that this walk hadn't been all that bad. I mean, it was nice, mostly. It was kind of like a really short date, he thought. Well, not a date. Geez, of course not a date. Not anything like a date, but it was still good and satisfying, like he'd imagined riding to school together could be, only shorter. And now he's running out of time. He could feel his heart pounding in his face and in his hands gripping the handlebars of his bike. This had not gone as planned. They had reached the foot of the hill about the same time. That was by design. He'd followed at a safe distance as everyone left the school parking lot, watching her ride ahead, riding over the curbs from street to street, imagining what they'd talk about on their walk together up that long hill. He'd crossed the street in the last block and sped up so he could pedal along opposite her, and then cross back to her side at the foot of the hill. They'd stopped together. "Hi," he'd said. "Hi," she'd replied. She'd smiled, too. He was pretty sure she'd smiled, too. For these 5 minutes had been a great walk together, even though he hadn't told her any things he wanted to tell her, like about the treehouse behind the house next to hers. And by the way, did she know he'd customized his bike with these generator lights and speedometer and toolkit? Oh yeah, she probably noticed them by now. But he hadn't talked about them. Why hadn't he talked about them? Now, though, they were almost to the top of the hill, and he was out of time. But he could feel her looking at him again. This was as close as he'd ever been to her since he'd moved in across the street. And he had wasted it. Wasted it. He turned and looked at her finally, and she was smiling, like she thought he was about to say something as she swung back onto her bicycle seat. "You don't talk a lot, do you, Will?" she asked. "She knows my name." I didn't know she knew my name. I can't believe she knew. He tried to breathe and say something back. "That's okay," she said when he didn't reply. He could see their street and her driveway from where they'd paused at the top of the hill, and she started pedaling away from him. It took a second or two, and she said, "See you tomorrow," over her shoulder as her bike rolled ahead. He tried to get his mouth moving. "Yeah, oh, okay," he said, finally, as inches became yards. He added, "I'll see you tomorrow, too," as he got back on his own bike, breath and words still competing for escape from his uncooperative mouth. See you tomorrow. That was good, right? I mean, either from the porch or the bottom of the hill, or maybe even in the hall or the cafeteria at school. "See you tomorrow," she'd said, and it sounded really nice. He was so happy. He just sat there, right in that spot on his bike, and watched her until she disappeared. That was See you tomorrow.